Hey guys, it's Rob with the Everyman movie review. I wanted to give you a bit of a bonus episode this week, not only because I saw a movie that I wouldn't usually review and probably one that you're not really looking for, but also because I neglected to say in my episodes for Sunday that I am super excited. My brand new light kit came in. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm hoping that this is really improving your viewer experience. This is along with matching the new mic setup. So those of you who are listening in podcast form, I hope your audio experience is much better than it has been in the past. But new lights, new mics, new green screen, everything is coming up roses for me, and I'm hoping it's going to mean a much better experience for you who are checking out these reviews. And if you listen to the podcast, go on over to youtube.com/Rob Cheek and check out the video so you can see everything that there is to see about the video aspect of the podcast, about the video aspect of the show. And if you typically listen on YouTube, go on over to anchor.fm/Everyman movie reviews and check out the podcast form where you get it all in just audio. I know a lot of times it's easier to check out the audio in your life. Well, there's a way that you can do that. But I do go through the effort of recording the video with these new fantastic lights. So check out the video if you get a chance as well. But I'm not just here to talk about the lights and the mics and everything else. I want to talk about a movie that probably isn't your usual fare. It's not what you guys are coming here for reviews for, but it is a movie that I saw and I really enjoyed, and that is Meeting Gorbachev. Now, for anyone who is my age, slightly older, but definitely younger, Mikhail Gorbachev is a guy who had a huge impact on your life, even if you didn't know it. He was the 8th and final president of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, otherwise known as the Soviet Union, known to most of us as Russia, even though Russia was just part of it. But for those of us who are of this generation, we survived the end of the Soviet Union. And Mikhail Gorbachev is a guy who is given the blame, or the thanks, however you tend to look at it, for that happening. But it's not just about the fall of the Soviet Union, it's about the man itself, and we get to see a little bit about his life told by him. And there is just something unique about having an 80-year-old man sit down and tell his story, something that is just to him the story of my life, but to all of us has such a huge impact. Now, I didn't enter school until 1990, so that was round about the time the Soviet Union was breaking up. I never had duck and cover drills and all of those things that our parents and grandparents may have had when they were in school or at work because of the fear of the Cold War getting hot all of a sudden. But I was born and I did live during the period of the Cold War. That was, of course, the long 80-year-old conflict that never really came about to violence directly between the Soviet Union and the United States. And Mikhail Gorbachev was really the face of the evil empire, as Ronald Reagan called it. And he was a very recognizable face. You may have seen video of a guy in his 40s or 50s with a port wine stain. That's a birthmark that is dark red on his forehead. Typically those do happen on the shoulders, the face, the forehead. But it just so happened that he was balding and had male pattern baldness. That's a typical U shape. And right there, splot in the middle, was a port wine stain birthmark. And that made him super recognizable. And that made him the face of everything evil in the world. And even though I don't remember the years that I was alive during the Soviet Union there in the 80s, even when we went off to fight conflicts in the Balkans or the Horn of Africa or in the Middle East, none of those evils really rose to the level of the Soviet Union. And none of those leaders really had the notoriety of Mikhail Gorbachev. And I'd like to think I'm pretty educated about the time period, but even now I still have those inklings of thoughts about the evil empire and everything that they did. And I have thoughts about Boris Yeltsin, the first president of Russia, separated from the USSR Russia, as the hero who helped bring about its breakup. But hearing the story from Mikhail Gorbachev and from other men who were there, the Politburo and the government officials and the military, who kind of put a new perspective on what happened. And Boris Yeltsin may not be the great hero that we think he is, and Mikhail Gorbachev is not the great villain that we think he is. And I think I said at the opening, this was directed by Werner Herzog. I love a Werner Herzog documentary. I think that he is an amazing documentarian. He was joined by Andre Singer in his efforts in this, in the directing role, and it's starring Werner Herzog. And I think that there is a different kind of documentarian, and Werner Herzog is that guy. On more than one occasion in documentaries I've seen of his, someone who's being interviewed has gotten up and left because they were just not going to answer the question he wanted them to answer. And there will always be a place for interviewers who maybe hit a little more with kid glove. Barbara Walters and Katie Couric will always have a place because we want to hear the people in their own words tell their stories. But I doubt you're ever going to see them come back as angry as they might with an interview with Werner Herzog. And now as we look to the future decades and we say to ourselves, how did all of this happen? We're going to want documentarians like Werner Herzog who ask tough questions, even if it means the risk of a huge multi-million-dollar project. He could have $10 or $15 million invested in a documentary. He could go to interview the person, but he is going to ask the question that we want answered, no matter if that means the person gets up and leaves in the middle of the documentary. And that is absolutely what we're going to need when we try to explain what has happened over the last 4 or 6 or 8 years, not only in America, but in the world all over. Now, I actually caught meeting Gorbachev on a flight. I know I've been taking a lot of flights recently, and I was in the midst of reading a book or working on something on my laptop when I realized that this movie was available, something I hadn't even heard of before. And so I said, you know what? Let's put everything else away. Let's plug in some headphones because I'm going to want to pay full attention to what I'm about to see. And it did not disappoint. Another thing I love about Werner Herzog documentaries is they never really feel like a documentary. They do because it's interviews and it's stories and it's him talking and voiceover, but they're always so entertaining and about such topics that I really want to know about that it just draws me in. And meeting Gorbachev was not anything less than that. He had the opportunity to go and interview the man 4 times, even once after a bout of sickness where Mikhail Gorbachev is looking at maybe the end of his life and he really wants to get that story told. So he invites him back. And not only do they do interviews, but they become friends. And by the last interview, he's asking him very tough questions, not just to a guy, not to a historical figure, but to a friend of his. And it's so strange to see that dynamic play out. But I just think it is almost magical the way that that story came together and the way that there's a documentary about a guy, but it's also a little bit about a documentary of the documentary as we see how these things progress. So Werner finds people from his life, whether they're friends from, when he was younger or when he was growing up through the ranks of the party, and he tells this story about a man who at the beginning doesn't seem like he's going to be any different than any other, but finds himself in a position to maybe do the right thing. And that's one thing I really learned about Mikhail Gorbachev through this documentary, is that he was a guy who really believed in the Soviet system, but he was willing to destroy the thing that he loved in order to save it. And he took some risks, he did some things that he thought were best, and in the end, those brought about the end of the system that he believed in. And maybe we need a little bit more of that in society. We need guys who are going to say, I'm going to make a tough decision because it's the right decision. And I think that once we get to the other side of this thing I love will be even better. And if it's not, well, I didn't really want the thing that I had, that I loved, in its current form. And that's basically what Mikhail Gorbachev did. He did everything he could to save the Soviet system, but it ended up bringing about its end. Now, obviously, that means that this kind of movie is not going to be for everyone. I am a history nerd, especially American history, towards the end of the 20th century. So for me, this could not be any more in the breadbasket. Just a fat fastball coming right down the middle. It's almost as if they made this movie just for me. But if you're not into history, and especially if you're not into documentaries, you may not enjoy it as much as I did. Now, I still think everyone should watch it because it's important for everyone, especially Americans, especially around my age, to see that there are 2 sides to every story, and maybe we need to make sure that history tells that true story. But for most people, this is going to be a skip. But hey, it's not a usual episode. It's a bonus episode. I was enraptured by Mikhail Gorbachev. I think anyone who watches it will feel the same way. And if you like Werner Herzog, especially as an actor maybe, in his performance in Mandalorian on Disney+, which you should absolutely be watching, then I think you're going to like him now, his soothing voice with that heavy accent as voiceover in the documentary and asking the questions of everyone as he goes around interviewing. So if you find yourself on a flight and got nothing better to do, this is definitely a movie to consider. And even if you're at home, it's available on streaming. So go find it on Amazon and watch the movie because it's so important to know enough about history that we don't make the same mistakes. History, in the end, will always repeat itself. And people like Werner Herzog and documentaries like this, Meeting Gorbachev, are going to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that we ever made before. So if you get the chance and you're like me, a history nerd, a documentary nerd, definitely catch it. If not, maybe not. But hey, like I said, it's a bonus episode. We got another new episode coming for you on Thursday, and it's probably more the fare that you would be used to from these reviews. But if you do like those kind of movies, Meeting Gorbachev is absolutely worth your time and effort to go and watch.